Hello, happy Wednesday. Welcome to another orientation video. This one about managing a socially distanced classroom. I was inspired to make this video and to give my perspective on classroom management, classroom operations in the FYS program for the fall 2020. I was inspired to do this based off of the work that the Center for Teaching and Learning and the IT people have been doing all summer, giving us training on how to use the technology, giving us training on how to approach our students in this upcoming semester. So what I'm putting forward here is coming from a rather personal perspective. It's coming from how I'm planning to operate my classroom, and it's coming from the perspective of what I have done with small groups that I believe can be successfully adapted to an environment that is socially distant. So it's not meant to contradict anything IT has said. It's certainly not meant to contradict any of the wonderful resources that the Center for Teaching and Learning has put out there. Rather, it is meant to supplement and to be very specific to the FYS circumstance. So social distancing, you know how every year, I don't know who announces this, but every year somebody, some organization deems a word or a phrase to be the word of that year. If I was allowed to go to Vegas and gamble, I would bet on social distancing being the word of 2020. It's everybody's favorite buzzword: social distancing, physical distancing. Here at Albion, where we plan to operate a decent number of our classes in person, including the FYS program, here's what we can expect in our classrooms. We may all be in there, but it's not going to be recognizable in the sense of what we are all used to and what we have all experienced in the past teaching either here or anywhere else. So I took this right out of Albion's official communications to students. We can expect furniture in all classrooms, labs, and teaching spaces has been reduced and laid out with 6 feet of physical distance between them. So in the past couple years, I have taught my first year seminar in a seminar room with one big table and everybody packed around it. So I can already tell that that's not going to be in line with what I have experienced in the past. Furthermore, we are also told that teaching spaces will all be a minimum of 6 feet from student seating, and a plastic or plexiglass barrier will be in place. It's almost like being a cashier at 7-Eleven at this point. Again, very different from what I've experienced. I've never lectured or taught or done a discussion or any of this stuff with a physical clear barrier in front of me. And that raises some concerns about how many of us are really prepared to do this and how many of us have really thought about this. So this video is designed to encourage your own thinking and to also invite your experience and expertise back to the group to think collectively about how we can teach in a physically and socially distanced classroom. Because few of us have experience in this type of classroom. I don't think I'm alone in that. Some people among us may have this type of experience. You know, if you ever did an inside out program, for example, I know that the setting is sometimes a little different than the Albion specific setting. But just from reading these 2 sentences, I already know this is unlike anything I have ever personally experienced. Enter the FYS program, where, admittedly, we have a few advantages that other classes can't assume. And that's why I wanted to make this from an FYS perspective, because much of the stuff about flexing or hybrid or online teaching is hopefully not going to be applicable to us. Here's the advantages that we have. We are teaching primarily in person. That's going to be the primary mode of instruction for these 7 weeks of Module A for those of us teaching FYS. And that's an advantage. We know that, generally speaking, we can expect our students in the classroom. Maybe I'm hoping that and cross my fingers. But either way, that's the philosophy. We can expect to have our students physically present in the classroom. So we will, more accurately, we are going to be physically present in the classroom. So we are going to be able to engage with them in person in a way that's different from what I'm doing right now and giving this talk and trying to speak to my colleagues into a computer screen, sitting alone in my empty panic room. We're also not going to have to flex. This is important. It's important to know this because one of the key goals of FYS is building community. And if we're flexing, remember a flex class says, all right, these half of the students are going to show up on Monday and this second half is going to show up on Tuesday, and then it reverses. Because our classes are A, small enough, and B, all in rooms that can safely accommodate our enrollment of 14, 15, maybe 16 students, we're not going to have to flex. So you can always count on generally having your class physically with you that day. And finally, we can expect most students to be physically present, right? So we will be present and they will be present. And that will not be the case with the majority of other classes throughout campus. But as I previewed on the last slide, this idea that we are just going to have 15 people sitting around a seminar table discussing a text or discussing a film that we watched or talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes. Maybe that's just my particular FYS where I try to do that. The idea that we're going to have 15 people sitting around a seminar table, that's just not going to happen. That is just not going to happen. And that immediately puts us in uncharted waters for many of us, I would say. Some people might have experience doing FYS in a different classroom. Many of us will have experience teaching in a much larger classroom in other areas. But whether those two things intersect, it hasn't in my case, and it might not for many others as well. So that's not going to happen. Even though we have these strengths of will be physically present in the room, the students is going to be physically present in the room, and we're not going to have to flex, every strength that we have can be a weakness if it's done inappropriately and if it is happening in the wrong circumstances and setting. Every strength can be a weakness. Something my mom used to say, actually. So for starters, just thinking about what the room is going to be like and the environment that we're expected to operate in, I already know I'm not going to be able to move around the room, certainly not without violating the 6 feet social distance guidelines. I'm just not going to be able to do that. And if I have a plexiglass barrier in front of me or a plastic barrier, whatever it is, if I have that barrier in front of me, I'm not super anxious to get out from behind that anyway. Like that's been put in there for my protection, for your protection. And I see many reasons why I should be using that, for my own protection and to protect the students as well. So if we can't move around the room, that immediately takes away something I like to do during my classes, which is move around the room. Secondly, the environment is going to be a little stressful, right? I have heard from colleagues at other institutions that have had some in-person meetings, and I have heard from some of my friends and family members that are in having to physically go to the workplace, are working in retail or service work, things like that. And one of the things they're saying over and over again is, oh my God, I'm constantly looking at people's masks. Is their mask too loose? Did they just take it off? The stress from constantly looking at each other is not good for our state of mind or our productivity in the classroom. We have to put our faith in each other. Hopefully that's something that can be a strength, but can also be a weakness if we are unwilling to do that. We are going to have to speak differently. We'll likely have to alter our tone of voice. The way that we speak, we're going to have to project in a different way if there's a barrier in front of us and if we're wearing a mask. And if your students are wearing a mask, people are worried about whether we'll be able to hear each other or whether we will be able to use our body language and our facial expressions to get our points across in supplement of the words that we are speaking. We're going to have to rely much more on the spoken word and much less on these nonverbal forms of communication. We're going to have to mentally measure 6 feet. Like, I know when I get in the classroom, I'm going to immediately look around, like, are those desks where they're supposed to be? Is everybody far enough apart? Hey, is that mask tight enough on your face? I mean, this is not why any of us got into this business. None of us got into this industry to do that type of mental gymnastics, and yet here we are. I'm willing to do it because I like my job, but it's certainly a weakness in that my attention is on that type of thing instead of sociology, instead of on academic capacity building, so on and so forth. Also, some of our classes are an hour and 40 minutes. I am a big coffee drinker in class. I pretty much have a cup of coffee with me in every class that I teach. My mom always tells me I drink way too much coffee. Mom probably has a point on that. But the point is I'm accustomed to it at this point. I'm used to it. When I'm speaking for such a long period of time, I'm used to being able to drink water, being able to drink coffee, being able to drink tea. And that raises a question for me about my mask, right? What am I going to do? I have to schedule a water break? How do I do this exactly? I haven't quite figured that part out, but here are my thoughts in general on how to operate within a socially distanced classroom and how to run class in a socially distanced classroom. Once this goes up, I encourage you to also respond to the email that I'm sending out today. And if you have ideas of your own, things that you are planning on doing or things that you have done in the past that you want to do, share it with us. Share it with me and share it with your colleagues, because I'm certain we can all benefit from each other's expertise. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing in this upcoming year, and it's become a bit of a dirty word in liberal arts education, the lecture. I want to encourage everybody, do not fear the lecture. I hear a lot of concerns, well, really two sides of the same coin. The first concern I hear is that the traditional lecture stinks. The traditional lecture is a bad way to engage with students, especially with a generation of students that has a crippling technology addiction and likely shorter attention spans than people may have had in the past. So that's concern one. The lecture might be not the best way to engage with students. Concern number two is that since so many of our active learning strategies that we've developed over many years are not safe anymore, we'll revert right back to the lecture. I say, don't fear the lecture. I say, make it the most engaging, dynamic lecture that you can possibly give. I'll never forget, when I was in grad school, for example, I'll never forget being in grad school, at my PhD institution, every Friday or many Fridays throughout the semester, there was a departmental brown bag where a professor in the department would present their research. And often we would invite a scholar from another institution to come give a talk and, meet with grad students, things like that. And in my first or second year, I attended a brown bag talk from a sociologist named John Iceland, University of Arizona. And he's a sociologist of poverty and social mobility, very well published, renowned guy. But what I was really what really stuck with me that day, not the content of his speech, he was at that point the most dynamic public speaker that I had ever personally been in the room to listen to. And I was, throughout those 45 minutes, I was just eating out of that guy's hand. When a lecture is delivered well, when it's dynamic, when it's engaging, and when it meets the needs of the students, the lecture is not dead at all. Okay, and I admit that this is how I learned to speak, how to teach. When I was doing my PhD at Ohio State, I taught generally large classes when I was a GTA. I had a large number of students in the classroom, and therefore I did a lot of lecturing. And I think I learned how to do it well. And that's what I'm depending on as the primary way to carry me through this upcoming year. Lectures work when they are applicable, when the students are compelled to listen because they feel it's applicable to them in their lives. Lectures work when they are full of examples, when these examples can help students understand and connect to something in their own lives. Lectures work when we are animated, when we are energetic. They work when we raise the bar in the classroom. Students will meet you. I'm a believer that students will generally meet you where you are. If you're disorganized, and sometimes I have been in the past, my students will not feel any sense of organization. If I am sleepy, my students will not feel any sense of energy in class on those days. But if I'm raising the bar, the students will at the modal student will rise to meet those expectations. Use an effective PowerPoint, give it life, give it images, give it pictures. I use a PowerPoint that is really just designed to keep me going, right? I don't have endless text. I have certain things I'm writing that I want the students to have down in their notes verbatim. But really the PowerPoint is meant to just keep me in flow. It's meant to keep me moving at the right pace. So an effective PowerPoint, there's a visual learning thing going on as well to accompany your lecture. And finally, plan your key points in advance. I have never been the type of professor that sits down and writes out a lecture. Rather, I plan the key points I want to hit, usually one per slide. What's this slide accomplishing? What's this slide accomplishing? And then I try to be as animated and as energetic as I can in getting that point across. Lots of examples as applicable as I can. And in this way, I'm able to run a primarily lecture-based class in a way that students still find engaging and active, even if it's not fitting the definition of active learning. And so I'm going to rely upon that heavily in this upcoming year. Secondly, discussions. If the strength that I have personally is that I'm a good lecturer, I've always been jealous of what I am not good at. I've always been jealous of my colleagues who are excellent at running a discussion. I admit, I do these. I do want the students to have an opportunity to speak and to discuss with one another. But I would be lying if I said that it was something I was inherently comfortable with. In my heart, I don't like giving up control in the classroom. It's always an internal struggle for me to do this. So file this, I'm like anybody else in that there are certain elements of teaching that I know I excel at, and there are certain elements of teaching that I know I personally struggle with. So what I'm looking for, I'm going to try to experiment with classroom discussions in this upcoming year, because again, we can't all pack around a seminar table and discuss sociology. We can't all pack around the seminar table and discuss the common reading experience the best we could do. So I'm going to try to experiment and try to get better at doing this, because discussions are both a hallmark of the FYS classroom, and the more spread out we are, the harder this is going to be. So how do we run a distant discussion? I very much welcome feedback from people who have experience doing this and have good ideas for how they want to do this. But I think a good distance discussion, if you can find ways to moderate the discussion, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to leave the discussion. I want students to be responding and discussing specific points. And I'll guide them in that way, but make the students will be in control of what is said and where that discussion actually goes. I'm preparing a series of specific and yet open-ended questions. Specific in that these questions have to have an answer, and yet they're going to be open-ended in that students can take them in a few different directions. So if I'm thinking about running a discussion about, let's say, chapter 1 of the common reading experience, I can have some specific questions about what happened in the chapter to kind of get us going, and then open-ended questions about maybe application to some of their own family experiences if they want to share them. And so in that way, I'm going to guide the discussion in the direction that I personally want it to go. I've also always had success in the past with starting with a writing prompt. Sometimes I will just have 5 minutes of free writing. I ask students to write a paragraph in response to an open-ended question that I pose. And then that forms the basis for getting our discussion off the ground. In other words, I think it might be difficult to just spontaneously get discussion to happen without the physical proximity of a seminar table. Right, the setting very much dictates what we're able to do. But if everybody's got something written down that can be the basis of where this goes, that might work. Right, I say might because I think we have all been in the position where we we're excited to plan something and then we're devastated when it went poorly. But that's how I'm gonna try to start several classes in that way. Thirdly, I am going to be doing a lot of live polling. This is something I like to do in my Sociology 101 class frequently, because it's usually like students can kind of take guesses and it gets us to an actual piece of data that I want them to be exposed to. So if all I'm doing is lecturing, all our students are going to do is listen, and maybe not even that. But if I try to break up my lectures with simple polling questions, things that are very easy to answer, but that need to be justified, I do this all the time in Sociology 101. So for example, what I mean by a live polling question is I will just ask students, hey, what percentage of Americans do you think have a college degree? Okay, so even if you're taking an educated guess or a completely wild guess at this, we're still getting a number out of them. So somebody might say 10%, and somebody might say 60%, and somebody might say the correct answer of about 32 to 33%. The number doesn't really matter here. What matters is where we go from there, which this is how I get, like, I can guide a specific topic that I care about. I can get the students to interact with me, and then I can ask them the very simple follow-up question of, okay, once I tell you what the real number is that number higher or lower than you thought it would be? And most importantly, why? Why did you assume or think that your prediction was what it was? And so I've had students say in the past, for example, I had one student say that in response to this specific question, what percentage of Americans have a college degree? Somebody said 75%, which is a way, way overestimation of what the true value is. And when I asked this student, why did you think it was that high? The answer was, well, I went to a high school where pretty much 100% of the people I went to, of my classmates, went to college. And so it just seemed like everybody did it. And like, boom, now we're talking about educational inequality, for example. And so that's the key. This helped me blend lecture and discussion together. And so this is something that really plays to my strengths a little bit. Oh, and most importantly, this can be done like you're kind of engaging with students one at a time here, but also as a group. So we don't need, like, students don't need to be sitting around a table in order to be able to come up with a prediction to this. So I'll ask them, you know, other examples. What percentage of Americans have a college degree? What is the median age of first marriage for American males, for example? When was the last time that Michigan beat Ohio State? It's funny, whenever I ask this, students, doesn't seem like it's happened in their living memory. That's always a fun moment for me. But the key point here is that I have a number that I want them to know. And in this way, I can run an active classroom and then get to the points that I really care about, which is trying to explore the research as to why educational attainment is where it is, or trying to explain why age of first marriage is where it is, and whether it's been changing over time. And then finally, story time. This is going to be the way I try to build community in a socially distanced classroom. Story time, but not the kind that my mom does. My mom is a picture of my wonderful mother right here in the bottom right. She is, in my, I think, objective opinion, the greatest children's librarian of all time. So I'm not saying you bring in the common reading experience and read it to them the way that my mom does story time for 3- and 4-year-olds at the public library. Instead, I am going to try to start class with a story of my own and ask the students to also share. And this will be specifically targeted towards a theoretical concept that I really want to get to. So for example, I might ask students, tell me about the worst job you ever had. I have an example of this, of the worst job I ever had. You will never get all students to share, but you will get some of them to share. And these are often fun stories. They help the students bond with each other, and they help me get to know my students as well. So when I want to know about their worst job, it's not because I really care what they did to make money when they were 17. It's because I want to make a point here about bureaucracy, right? Bureaucracy in a sociological concept. I might ask people, what's your most embarrassing moment? So I tell them my story about an embarrassing moment, and the students usually have funny stories, usually about somebody that they had a romantic crush on. Those are always some of the most amusing ones. And so it's not that I care what what embarrassed them, or it's not that they care really what embarrassed me. What I'm really going for is trying to teach symbolic interactionism and role maintenance. What's something from childhood, from your childhood, that is different today? In other words, like how would one question I ask is, how would a baby born today in 2020, how do you think they'll experience the world differently from the way you experienced the world over the, your brief life so far? And really, I'm trying to talk about social change. I'm trying to talk about normative change. I'm trying to talk about value change around them. And so these are ways, I think these always help the students get to know each other, and they help build community in the classroom while also engaging with class concepts. So these are the 4 things that I'm going to lean heavily on. I'm going to try and be the most dynamic lecturer that I'm capable of being. I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to do live polling, and I'm going to experiment with moderated discussions in the classroom that are maybe a little more heavily moderated than just like people sitting around in their dorm rooms talking about something, to try and get to that point. And that's ultimately what I'm committing to for now, because all of you could sway me, certainly. So I really invite you, everybody listening to this, to respond to the email and to share any ideas you have with the rest of the group. I'm certain that I will benefit from it, and I think the group will benefit from it as well. So that's what I got for you. The next time, we have 1 more week to go before the start of the semester, and I have a couple more videos that will be coming to you, and then it'll be time to get to work. So enjoy the rest of your summer, and anything comes up on your end, don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.